income for not only carry the team, but all the passengers, all the fans that went with them. Except when some of the towns started to enforce the blue laws, as they did here in Bucyrus. Sundays now will be quiet. Ain't gonna be no more baseball on Sundays. But they did have a huge pool. They didn't call them pools in those days, they called them the big ones like that, they called them natatoriums. Have a jolly time at Sakayam Park, because the guy that owned it, his name was Jolly, Carl Jolly. And he was more than happy to take your money. When the interurban stopped going in 1931, this particular one, it was the beginning. Well, we were 2 years, 3 years into the Depression, and things were really tough. There was no turnaround in 1931. So the park suffered greatly. So like many other parks, they sponsored marathon dance contests. And these are the finalists on the right. You couldn't stop, you couldn't rest. You and your partner had to keep moving the entire time. Last couple standing won the $10 prize for the night. Sometimes they went till sun came up. Now the Pippin was, well, that looks like a toboggan coaster. And when Luna Park in Cleveland went out in 1929, they disassembled the whole thing, bought it, and took it out to Mansfield, or not Mansfield, but to Bucyrus. Northern Ohio Traction and Light. This looks kind of messy and complicated, but you know, we're starting up here in Cleveland and ending up in Uricksville down here. All these other things are the cities, because the city lines were all part of the Northern Ohio Traction and Light. Whereas, you know, in Cleveland, it was an independent system, the city system, independent of the interurbans. But NOT&L operated also all the city cars in Akron, Canton, and so forth. So that was a big operation. Starting out of Cleveland, the first place we get to is Bedford Glens, which is Tinker's Creek in Bedford. It's a very deep ravine. They had a dance hall, and the research will continue on Bedford Glens, because there's got to be more than what I've found so far. Halfway between Kent and Ravenna was Brady Lake. Again, another one of those lakes. They had a dance hall and probably lots of other stuff. Continuing south, Canton. Canton had one of the big ones, more information about it. Canton and Myers Lake. Actually, the interurban actually owned Myers Lake and operated for a number of years. Usually they didn't want to operate them. It was just not their business model. But they did operate. Eventually they sold it off to let somebody else operate it. Early shot, 1908. Coaster is over there on the right, Scenic Railway. And they actually had a car barn right on the property. So that's how involved they were there. And of course, the lake had canoeing. And then you get these very fanciful postcards that are colorized. In a lot of cases, they're better off not colorized. They're like Ted Turner finally discovered that colorizing all those movies turns them into crap, mostly. They were black and white for a reason to start with. And sometimes these are kind of interesting, these night pictures. And sometimes they're just crap. Picnic groves, they had a big picnic grove. You can see they saved as many trees as they could to keep the picnic grove nice and shady. You know, you'd grab your picnic basket. I can remember when I was a kid, we used to get out to Mastic Park 3 or 4 times a year, family reunions, get-togethers. And, you know, I didn't carry a damn picnic basket till it was heavy. I was a little kid. It's like slave labor. A lot of them, once the motion pictures came in, a lot of them set up theaters on their property. This is Myers Lake. That building in the background is a theater. And those became, you know, there weren't theaters in every town necessarily. Small ones especially didn't have one. So you went to the amusement park to catch a movie. Garfield Park, coming out of Cleveland, that was right on the line, right through the park. That pond and this pond, same one, are not there anymore. Cleveland Metro Parks took this park over 5 years ago, maybe. Maybe it's longer now. But the water from this comes from runoff in Garfield Heights. And Garfield Heights has not yet separated their sanitary sewers from their storm sewers. So when the Metro Parks took it over and analyzed the water, they drained it, smartly so, and the bacteria count was, you know, ridiculous. And eventually, when all the interceptor sewers get completed in Cuyahoga County, they will probably reopen this lake, put the dam back in. Now, in Akron, there's a bunch of parks, and they're hard to figure them all out. This one is called High Glens. It doesn't seem to have morphed into any amusement parks, but the Cuyahoga cuts a heck of a swath, deep gorge right through the heart of Akron. And streetcars going up and down the hills out of the valley, it was one of the steepest grades for a city streetcar line in the entire country. And right here, that's the bridge that takes the interurbans and the streetcars across the Cuyahoga Valley. You can see the bridge on the left, and there's pathways down there, there's caves and waterfalls and just a lot of summer day kind of hiking sort of thing. Lakeside Park in Akron, that's the only picture, can't tell you a thing about it. It's obviously a trolley park, there's sitting 2 of them right at the front door. Alliance. Lakeside Park in Akron. Lakeside Park in Alliance. Not much about this one either. It certainly looks like a dance hall and a canoe or a rowboat. Silver Lake. Silver Lake was Akron, Ken. Had a steamboat. And you can see 2 streetcars right there. Most lines had these open cars, no sides on them for the summertime. Some of them were convertible. They could take the sides off. It was, you know, just like a driving convertible. And catch all the fresh breezes. This was a toboggan. I don't know if this is, I guess this is one you just climb to the top and slide down on your whatever. It doesn't look like there's anything that goes up to the top other than a ladder. And one of the early things that came into parks was miniature trains. And boy, once they you couldn't have an amusement park without a miniature train. You just couldn't. That wasn't right. Roller rinks, again, very popular. This is in Akron, the Summit Beach Park. Got a late start, 1917, that's very late. Same park. Lakeshore Electric, heading east out of Cleveland. This was the one that lasted the longest, the last one to go out, 1938. Let's see, the Eastern Ohio went out in 25. Paynesville line went out in about 28. Southwestern 31. Northern Ohio about 33. So the Lakeshore lasted 5 years longer. If, especially the Lakeshore, if it could have lasted through the war, when it would really have been helpful to have those interurbans during the war years, if they'd have lasted to the end of the war, that line would probably still be in place and in use. And wouldn't it be nice to have all those lines today? It costs billions and billions to do that, and I don't know what you could. Lakeshore Electric, coming out of Cleveland, the first thing you come to is Scenic Park, or Lincoln Park. Well, today we know it as Scenic Park. And to get your bearings here, this is Detroit Avenue right here, heading right, Detroit streetcar, comes right back around the edge of the valley right here, and that's the Detroit Bridge going across the Rocky River Valley right there. So the Lakeshore Electric came into town on those tracks, and in here was, that whole area was the car barns, the Detroit Avenue car barns, which is now big high-rises, take up that whole section of town. And down at the bottom of the hill was this early park. It was a park, Lincoln Park, and then 1906, it got some rides in it, and it was a scenic park. And it's still called that today when you go down there. And so there was two major lines that came right to the top of the bridge, and there was a stairway you could get off and walk down to it. Despite that, despite having the only circular dance floor that revolved in the state of Ohio, and a high swing, and a toboggan coaster. There's the dance hall, there's the swing, giant swing, coaster in the background, it's an early one. That sure looks like a dance hall, not sure. A lot of guys fishing today. Don't see anybody catching anything. It just never, whether it was never publicized enough or marketed, it just didn't do well at all. And by 1910, I think it was its last year of operation. This is when they're completing construction of the new concrete Detroit Bridge, which was completed by 1910. So this looks like it could be early 1910 or late 1909. And if you look through the arch there, you can see the giant swing. So it was still active then, and by into 1910 it was gone. And if there was any hope of bringing it back, the flood of 1913 certainly took care of that. But even here in this picture, it looks like everything has been taken out of there with the exception of a couple of buildings. All right, you headed west, then you got to a major shop for the Lakeshore Electric at Beach Park. That building is still there today. There's a Lakeshore car sitting right on the front of it today as we speak. The guy that owns the building is a Lakeshore nut. He and another guy own a fully restored Lakeshore car, and it's on a piece of track right out in front of that building. The Avon Lake Theater used to be in that building. The restaurant there was also Saddle in, thank you. Yeah, you remember, you went there. I hear those heads nodding. And right across the street, Lakeshore owned the property that, this was on the south side of Lake Road, but they owned all the way across to the lake. So they set up they had a picnic grove there and a pavilion, 2-story, right on the edge of the cliff. You could look out over the lake. Evidently they weren't too interested in maintaining that park. Either that or CEI gave them a big chunk of change to buy it. That's where the Avon Lake Power Plant stands today, which I don't think is working, is it? Anybody know for sure?
Yes, it is.
It's still running?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Lakeshore also had, coming out of Sandusky, it had a branch line that went down to the Blue Hole. I mean, tell me you didn't go there as a kid. I won't believe it because you did. I know you did. I did. You can go right in Castalia, right in downtown Castalia, which is about as big as this inside of this room, is a blue hole. There's about 8 or 10 of them. They're all concentrated in that area up there. The state owns most of them except the one that you went to, and that's the famous one.
Did I hear they filled that in?
No, you didn't hear that.
But it's
If
no
you
longer,
did, it was a lie.
It's no longer an attraction? It's no longer.
Oh, it's privately owned. They just shut it down.
Oh, they shut it down.
The Trout Club bought it all. They own the whole thing now. And that's their beginnings of that building, as you see in the background right
What was
there.
the mystery behind Blue Hole? It just didn't seem.
Bottomless?
You know, they used to tell you that nobody's ever found the bottom of this. And I'm standing on the edge looking down there, and I can see the bottom. I never knew what the hell they were talking about. It's just,
Right around that corner, there was more.
it comes through limestone, and the limestone goes clear to the southern part of the state. Once you get west of Mansfield, you just split the state right down the middle. The sandstone is on the east half near the surface, the limestone is in the west half. All the big limestone quarries that are still active, and train loads are coming out every day. They're in western Ohio. And that whole aquifer goes all the way to Columbus. So that groundwater is seeping for miles and miles, and it's picking up more groundwater. And they just happen to come to the surface in this area. That's why there's 8 or 10 of them up there around the same area. So yeah, the water source is endless, or seemingly so. But it's not like they don't know where it is. It's hard to trace it that far. You can put dye in the ground sometimes and figure where it's coming out. This is such a long distance that you can't.
You couldn't float in that Blue Hole, could you? That was another
Remember they
story.
said
You couldn't float?
It was just sick.
Nope, that's another urban myth. What is true is there is no oxygen in the water. So you never see any fish swimming around in it. And so why do they have all those big trout up there? Because there's always water coming up and it flows out. Every one of these loopholes, the water flows out someplace, and in most cases, the top is perfectly clear and smooth. You can't see any water movement. But over on one side where you're not looking, there's a good-sized stream that's pouring out there 24 hours a day, 365.
I never understood how they could say there's no oxygen in there when the chemical compound of water is H2O.
Well, that's
So it
true.
means for every 2 parts of hydrogen, there's 1 part of oxygen.
Yeah, but it's tied
How
up.
do you have water and not have oxygen?
Well, it's not usable oxygen.
Not enough or something.
Yes.
You need O2 by itself.
Ah.
Unless you have gills. So what they do is they set up little dams on the stream that comes out, which is called Cold Creek. It flows about 3 miles and flows into Lake Erie. And that's where it crosses some public roads. So you can see those trout there on the public roads. You can see big flocks of
Oh, I remember seeing that.
big trout.
Oh, yeah.
But the water flows over the dam, and as it flows over, it mixes, and the mixture with the air lets oxygen gas get dissolved into the water, and then you can have fish in it. Okay, continuing on down the road and along the lake shore, the Lakeshore Electric was lucky because they didn't have to really do much, spend any money at developing any of these dance halls or amusement parks along the way, because they were just bumper to bumper all the way out to lake. Ruggles Beach. Lake Shore stopped right in front of it, stop 142, I think.
Is that the same family as Ruggles Ice Cream?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so. It was the Ruggles family that owned all the property around there. This is Linwood. Some of you may have been there. I know my grandparents were. That's my mother sitting on the upper left on the floor. And she's also in the picture on her right with her brother and her mother and father, which would be my grandmother and grandfather, right there on Linwood Beach, 1922.
Where are you?
There you go. With that twinkle in his head,
Crystal Beach, there's a book written about that one.
you were there?
I remember when we used to drive out to Cedar Point. We'd whine and cry and bitch and moan about, can't we stop at ride on the coaster at Crystal Beach?
We did too.
Of course you did.
If we left early enough.
Yeah,
If
I
we
know.
left too late.
And all these places had rental space. Crystal Beach had cottages. You could rent by the, not necessarily by the hour, but. I mean, I tried, but they wouldn't. And they had a dance hall, and they had a toboggan. The kids there trying to watch the toboggan go up and down. All right, here we are.
Where?
Where? We're at the end. This is it.
What is that up there?
Yeah, this is the last
Oh,
slide.
that was that last time. We didn't know what is it?
Well, you get, it's a test.
It's a test.
It says something.
All right, I saw a couple hands up. Some people thought they know. What is it?
What bay?
Nope.
Oh,
Well,
Not the Victory Hotel.
it's on Putin Bay,
It's Victory Motel.
Victory Hotel.
Victory Motel.
Victory Hotel.
I thought that's what it was.
The Victory Hotel. Now, I had to write all this down. I'm going to read it to you.
No, it's burned
Oh,
down.
man. Not even close.
who else wants to go?
I'm going to go fast, so you got to take shorthand here now. It was planned to open in 1888. There was a shortage of money. They never got it off the board until 1889. It took 3 years. It opened July 29th, 1892. Depending upon which account you read, it had either 625 or 825 rooms, 80 of which had a bath. Things were different in those days. It was 4 floors. It had 3 elevators. It had 2 dining rooms that could seat at the same time 1,200 people. It had private parlors, wine cellars, shops, a greenhouse, a barber shop, ice cream parlor, billiard rooms, newsstand, page 2, 1 mile of hall carpeting, 20,000 yards of room carpeting, 3,000 light bulbs, 16 and a half acres of flooring, 1,700 doors, 2,500 windows. In 1893, there was a stock market crash, and on August 5th of that year, they closed. It was then empty for 18 months. There was a sheriff's sale in 1895, and all the furnishings were sold. It reopened in 1896, almost 11 years. It had an natatorium was added in 1898 that was 30 feet by 100 feet.
That's still there.
No, that's wrong. It's 30 yards by 100 yards. That's better.
You can still see that.
Parts of it, yeah.
It's still there in the woods.
In 1898, this is now 2 years later, there was a smallpox epidemic. So there was 25 employees there that were quarantined. That didn't do them much good in that span of time. In 1898, later that year, a fellow by the name of McCrary was evidently a very strong marketer. And he ran the joint from 1898 to 1907. Unfortunately, he died in 1907, and it went right back to the dogs. It closed in 1909, just 2 years after he died. It reopened in 1918, at the end of the war, thinking that there would be a big rush of people who would like to stay here. In August of that year, fire broke out. The fire was seen as far as Detroit, and I forget how far to the west, to the east. Completely destroyed it.
Until bad luck.
Boy, it was.
I mean, it was when it first opened, it was advertised as the largest resort hotel on the planet. And who's gonna debate it?
What city was it in again? Put-in-Bay?
It's, the island is Put-in-Bay and the city is Put-in-Bay. And so it was right in the city, the town of Put-in-Bay, on Put-in-Bay Island.
Did any of it left at all any foundation or anything at all?
Yeah, there's you go online and just Google Victory Hotel, Putin Island, Putin Bay, and then you'll get the whole shtick. There's, you can wander around, it's a state park now, essentially. So there's remnants of it here and there, not a whole lot. A few stone foundations, that's it. Hey, there we are. Any questions, comments, additions, corrections? Complaints? I was late, yeah, I was working on it till 15 minutes before I got here. I thought I had this well under control. I've been collecting stuff for probably 3 years on this, leading towards a book. And, 2 weeks ago I started, maybe I better start putting it together. Wow.
Well, I was under the impression the state of Ohio bought the Blue Hole, and that's where they have their fisheries and hatcheries at.
Right.
They bought the hatchery.
No, it's, the trout club is adjacent to the fish hatchery.
No, the Blue Hole is a private trout club.